It was Scottish winter and I'm feeling surprisingly fresh after spending a bit more time properly looking after my skin. This spring, I've been far more intentional about the products I use. Less reacting, more proper care. Thoughtful decisions rather than quick fixes. Which is exactly why the Stockbridge Clinic feels like such a natural partner for this episode. A Scottish winter can really take its toll, especially when I'm out and about filming. Dullness, dehydration, tired looking skin. Taking care of your skin at this time of year can make a real difference. Stockbridge Clinic works with you to build a skincare strategy that suits your skin, your lifestyle, and where you are right now. It's considered, not reactive. They can help you to feel fresher, brighter, and more confident. Good skincare really is a work of art. Which brings us perfectly to today's guest, Catherine Muirden. Catherine is chair of the National Galleries of Scotland, so the idea of presentation, care and confidence feels especially fitting. Whether it's art, skin or personal style, the value is in expertise, intention and knowing what's worth investing in. It's about quiet confidence rather than overstatement. So we're delighted to have the Stockbridge Clinic sponsoring this episode of the Hood podcast. Let's get into our conversation with Catherine.
Welcome, Catherine Muirden. You are chair of the Board of National Galleries Scotland, and our editor at Hood, Emma, describes you as so much more than your impressive CV. So we wanted to dig a bit on that today and find out all aspects of your life and style. And we're just excited to open up the conversation.
Well,
thank you for coming.
I'm delighted to be here.
It's so good to meet you. The first question, I suppose, is when you were younger, what did you actually want to be and what would you advise your younger self?
Yes, that's a good question. If you'd asked me at age 6, I would have said an air stewardess. Oh. If you'd asked me at about 9, I'd have said a figure skater, because I was a figure skater. And then if you'd asked me at about 14 or 15, I'd have said a journalist.
Well, to your younger self, what advice would you give her from the perspective of where you are now?
I would say be bolder, have more courage. I was brought up in I was privileged, I was unconditionally loved, I was brought up in a wonderful household. But it was fairly sort of Scottish Presbyterian, if you know what I mean. There was that sort of sense of you've got to sort of don't get above your station, kind of hide your light under a bushel. And I think maybe if I'd been brought up in a slightly different culture, if you like, and I think things might have been slightly different, and I might have propelled my career forward and been more confident and more recognising of the skills that I had within myself, my personal capabilities. That might have been different. And so I would probably say to myself, be bolder.
Well, you've certainly done incredibly well. And we're going to come on to all of the things that you've done. Where are you from? Where were you brought up?
Yeah, I was brought up in the Highlands, in Easter Ross, in Rossshire, first of all. And then moved to Inverness. So if people generally ask me, if I'm working in London or whatever, people will say, where are you from? And I usually say Inverness, because that's their kind of focal point, if you like, or their most familiar point. But really, I was brought up proper Highland girl, really. My grandparents all were able to speak Gaelic. And I don't speak Gaelic, which is how a language dies out, I suppose. So at the moment, I'm trying to learn some Gaelic through the University of Edinburgh. I'm going to night classes. When I left school, I went to university in Edinburgh. And I have to say that when my first visit to Edinburgh made me just fall in love with the city, and I do still adore living in this city. I think we're incredibly privileged to live here. And then after university, I joined the Marks and Spencer graduate training scheme, which, I did what was called a general arts degree in those days. You could pick and choose a bit of philosophy, a bit of English language, a bit of literature. And then in my last year, I did fine art, the history of art. My first big stumbling block in life was when I came to Edinburgh and I went to university. In my first year, I did law.
Right.
And I realised from the very first lecture that I had done completely the wrong thing. But I persevered for a year, and then I swapped over to the arts faculty and pursued things that I actually enjoyed. And I suppose if there's a piece of advice I would give to anybody, don't just rush into university because you think it's the right thing to do or the right course to follow. Wait until you've decided what gives you actual joy in life, and then you can work out from there what kind of career path you might want to have.
It's so tough, isn't it? And you've got kids, and you'll be guiding them, or you have been guiding them, or to where
and
they
that's one of the things I say is do something you love, and then you'll find your path.
Yes.
And I'm assuming when you were doing your degree, you didn't go think to yourself, I'm going to end up rising through the ranks at Marks and Spencer's.
No, never thought of that. And when I was studying fine art and the history of art, I thought, and that was in my last year, I thought, I wish I'd done this this is what I should have done, really. And I would go to the National Gallery on the Mound here, and maybe I'd have an essay to write about Rembrandt or Poussin or something like that. But I never thought that 40 years later I would be the chair of the National Galleries of Scotland.
That's
you know,
it.
I used to go
It's
back
a
journey, isn't it?
Yeah, I used to go back to my flat, and one of my flatmates would say, "Is that you been staring at that Raphael all afternoon again?" And I would say, "Yeah, but Olive, it's an amazing work. You know, you look at the form and the composition, and they would sort of, you know, I guess some of my my student friends would have thought, how are you going to make a career out of that, you know? But ultimately, my hobby, if you like, in the arts carried me right through my business life. So the two have kind of worked in tandem whilst I've been working hard in business, because I stayed at Marks and Spencer for a long time, and then I went into banking, and then I was part of the rescue of the co-op. All along, I've been on boards. I was on the board of the Fruit Market Gallery here in Edinburgh. I ended up being the chair there. And, that's always been my kind of sideline, if you like. So if you can make the thing that you enjoy your kind of sideline, then ultimately when you get to a stage where you can do both at the same time, you can really have a very enjoyable and fulfilling life.
That's it. So yeah, I suppose from a perspective of someone who is trying to find their way, what else would you say to them when they have found their niche and they really want to home in on it, you know?
I always think it's incumbent on women, particularly, to give one another a kind of leg up, you know, in the career ladder. Sometimes it's difficult to find the person or the people that are going to be part of your network. But often when I'm working with someone on their career path, and I do that occasionally as a kind of another sideline, I say to them that, you know, your life is a little bit like if you take a piece of paper and you drew out a planetary chart with all of the planets revolving around one another, and you're the planet in the middle, where out in your kind of universe are the people that are there and are going to be able to help you? You know, there might be a twinkling little star out there somewhere who's ready to help you, but you just don't know that yet. There may be a massive planet somewhere that you're not paying enough attention to and is revolving around you. And I sometimes use that kind of analogy for people and say to them, all of this success is usually built around relationships. It's not built around something you've done on, I don't know, in an application form or your CV or something that's generated by AI or whatever. It's built on human relationships. And I've found that, I mean, in my working life, for example, very often I'll work with a board, and I'll maybe join a board, and they'll say, well, we need you to set up a remuneration committee, or we need some technical advice on such as that. Actually, what it usually boils down to is people.
Yeah.
You know, as one CEO once said to me, all of this would be so straightforward, Catherine, if it wasn't for the people. And I said, well, that's what the HR director or the chief people officer is there to help you with, to help you navigate those relationships. So I would say to somebody that's setting up in life and decided they've found their niche, go out and be bold and make as many connections as possible. Build your planetary chart and work out who you're maybe not paying enough attention to or who could help you. And when you go to events or something that perhaps focuses on the particular subject that you're interested in, go to the table without the people that you know.
So networking with
yes,
a direction. It's not just
Absolutely.
mingling and
yes,
Yes. And once you've met somebody like yourself, and I've got a good friend called George McNeil, he's an amazing man, just so good at networking and keeping in touch and nurturing those relationships.
Yes.
You want to be like that, and it's so inspiring meeting people like you that are so good at that.
Well, I think there's an interesting generational issue here, I think, as well. I mean, I've always brought up, I have one son, Theo's 21, and I have always brought him up to talk to people. I've always said to him, art of conversation, Theo, art of conversation. And we might go, I mean, he's been dragged around many galleries, as you can imagine, you know, in his lifetime.
Kicking and screaming.
Going to openings and that kind of thing. And I'll say, you know, even in his school uniform when he was little, I will say, you know, we're going to meet somebody, we're going to meet John, and I'll say, art of conversation, Theo. And he now has the ability to talk to people from all walks of life. And I think that is something that should be treasured in that generation particularly, who have spent so much time interacting with one another on screens.
Lockdown as well.
Lockdown has affected them very, very badly, very badly.
Yes.
And I think lockdown is just playing out
because people
year
started
after
jobs
year.
without going into offices,
Exactly.
did degrees without going into lectures, and I think it does have an impact.
Yes.
And probably you'll see it in your work life as well as your arts connections.
Yes, I agree with you completely. You know, a sort of enforced, well, you know, we ended up being incarcerated with one another, didn't we, really? And for youngsters, particularly teenagers, that's provided a significant barrier to their social development, I think. But even with youngsters who, I'm on the board of Sistema, the Big Noise, the charity that encourages children to learn a musical instrument, from tiny tots right through to teenagers. And we're based in some of the most kind of challenging, economically challenging areas of Scotland. And, you know, I talk to the teachers about how it feels to have these youngsters who've had to learn musical instruments during lockdown online. It's a very clumsy sort of way of learning, but they persevered with it. It helped. But of course, there are youngsters now who maybe if they've missed out in primary 1 and primary 2, maybe they don't have the same approach to discipline, the discipline of a teacher telling them to do something, not to. It's proven very challenging for teachers, I think, also lockdown. So it's not just teenagers that have been affected.
No.
I think youngsters particularly too.
Parents as well, you know, it's difficult. But, you know, you do so many things. You've got so many plates spinning and it's incredible. How have you managed to go through these different stages in your life, bringing up family, changing careers, and still keep smiling at the end of it? What's your secret?
Well, I suppose I'd say to anybody, choose your partner well. You know, my husband gave up work when we had our son, and he still did occasional bits and pieces of work. He was a furniture designer. But without his support, I couldn't have done what I do. So we had a fairly, if you think about 20 years ago, fairly unconventional approach to family life. You know, he was at the school gates with the other mothers, predominantly mothers. I think that has changed now And I think that a lot of employment policies have allowed that to change as well. When I was at the John Lewis Partnership, I was charged with setting the people strategy for the next 5 years. And one of the things that we did was equalise maternity and paternity leave, so that men could, fathers could leave for 6 months, and they would have their leave for parental responsibilities, and that helped to retain people. But it was quite controversial at the time, even like 5 or 6 years ago, to do that. So I think employment practice has changed that. In our time, 20 years ago, it was a little bit more challenging, but it meant that I could pursue my career, work in London when I was in banking, lived in Edinburgh, worked in London.
Oh, gosh.
When I was at the Co-op, I lived in Manchester. I worked in Manchester and lived in Manchester during the week, and then came back to Edinburgh.
In those times, and in fact, even now, all the way through, how do you protect Catherine herself, the Catherine outside of work?
Yes.
You must have to try and nurture yourself and do some self-care, but it must have been a bit hard at some points.
Oh, I think I went through a lot of stressful times. And when I look back on them now, I do surprise myself that I managed to power on through. And how did I manage the self-preservation? Well, I suppose that when you're traveling, one of the things I did was I tried to compartmentalize life so that there was work life and traveling was done so that somebody else did the traveling for me. I flew or I took trains. I never drove, around. It's a waste of time unless you're having a conversation with somebody at work on the phone. So I tried to make sure I was as productive as possible during my working day and my traveling day, and then came home at night and switched off. However, during those years in banking, do you remember the BlackBerry? The BlackBerry was like beside my bed.
Glued to you, yeah.
Then it was glued to me, and I did find that a particularly stressful time. But I always say, whenever I'm kind of giving advice to someone or mentoring somebody in work, sleep, hydration, exercise, diet.
The Stockbridge Clinic is multi-award-winning, doctor-led practice in Edinburgh. Their approach is thoughtful, expert and highly individual. Treatments are bespoke, spanning personalised skin plans, advanced lasers and rejuvenating treatments, with nothing ever delivered as a one-size-fits-all solution.
I want to ask, what is in your handbag as a survival kit in these difficult situations? Do you have a lip gloss? Do you have what's in that bag?
I do usually have a lipstick. I don't have. I've occasionally carried around these pillow sprays and things like that for
sleeping,
catching a nap.
Okay, yeah.
On a train, or
that's a good
I
idea.
do love a nap.
What kind
20
of
minutes.
sprays?
This works.
Okay,
That
yes,
one.
This Works spray is a good one. Pillow spray. We were having a conversation before you arrived about women mentoring women through the workplace.
Yes.
We talked before we started filming about bosses, etc. There's obviously times in your career where you've gone into places and things are sort of shaky, wobbly.
Yes.
What advice do you give to other women, when you're in that situation?
Yep. One of the things that I suppose mark out the choices that I've made in my career have been about going into situations where a turnaround is required, where things need to change. So that might be because of a financial crisis, or it might mean because a business has just been taken over, or could be that the share price has fallen off a cliff, whatever. And I've done this with a couple of people quite recently, over the last kind of decade or so. You walk into a place and there's something about what I would call the smell of the place that tells you that things are just not right. And it's not anything that's written down. It's not anything that's in a policy. It's not something that's formal. It's just something about what I call the the TNTs, the tiny noticeable things.
Sixth sense.
The tiny noticeable things about a business, for example. But likewise, if you want to change the culture, you have to change the tiny noticeable things as well. So, for example, in one business that we went into, I'm saying we, this was me and another female CEO and her executive team. We went into this head office that was very shiny head office. Just an executive suite,
Did they have the
executive
coffee machine in the
showers,
corner?
executive this, and people bringing your
Branded everything.
lunch on a tray to your desk, that kind of thing. We looked outside, and yet we knew that this needed a turnaround. So financially, it was like on a cliff edge. We looked outside, and there was executive car parking spaces that were like outside the building, and they were reserved for the executive. There was a huge car park, it's like 1,000 people, huge car park, executives. And we thought, right, okay, we need to mark that something's going to change here. So somebody went out with a pot of paint and like painted over them and put a big star on them instead. And that was the launch of the car park lottery. So every week, somebody's name was drawn out. 4 people's names were drawn out of a hat, and they got the chance to park in that space.
That's
each
great.
week. And that is a tiny, noticeable thing. It was tiny, but it's very noticeable, isn't it?
Yes.
So people looked out the window and thought, I think things are changing around here, So to answer your question about what you do for women, maybe it is a very noticeable thing, like setting up a women's network group within the workplace, or a development program. I've done that many times, within big organizations. But it might just be something that is maybe smaller. I don't know. I went into one big office block where you couldn't get a period product without going outside to a supermarket down the road, right? You went into the ladies' loos, there was nothing. And I had to say to the head of estates, who was a man, look, maybe you don't know this, but you can't get a period product in this building.
Productivity will be going down
I
by
know.
50%.
Yes. So that had to change. So,
Yeah.
sometimes there are things that are available for women or not that tell you something. It's a noticeable thing that tell you something about what it's like to work there as a woman.
Yeah, people say don't sweat the small stuff, but I actually think sometimes it's good to sweat the small stuff.
Yeah, I think it is.
1%.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
And also, of course, I've been in organisations where it's been an all-male executive, or the leadership are all, male-dominated. And I have found that in appointing a woman, it makes it very hard for the single woman to I'm going to say survive. I don't mean to, they have to kind of fight their corner in a different way. But once you get the second woman in, that's, then it becomes kind of plain sailing, I think.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Don't recruit one, recruit 2.
Yeah.
Because then they can kind of look after one another. And also, it just changes the dynamic. Like a family changes when a new partner comes in, somebody gets married, a child is born, there's a death in the family. The dynamic of a family changes when new people come and go, and it's exactly the same in the workplace.
That is interesting.
That is very interesting.
Can we talk about fashion? Because power dressing, this is beautiful.
Thank
What
you.
are you wearing?
This is a M&M dress.
Current season?
No, it's not.
very lovely.
It's not a current season. Can I let you in on a secret?
Please.
I bought it off Vinted.
Oh,
we
I
are.
love it.
Are you a Vinted fan?
My kids are more Vinted than I, but they helped me.
Yeah.
I bought it off Vinted. But I do love, I do have, fully paid price point dresses from M&M, but I do know that their particular size fits me.
your
And I'm a
body.
big fan of dresses, probably because I've spent so much time packing and travelling, that if you can get a dress that you can throw on that looks fairly formal in the workplace, I much prefer doing that than packing suits and blouses and all of that kind of thing.
It's
as well.
also one decision.
It's one decision, exactly.
That and the shoes you're done.
Yes, that's it. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And also, I'm wearing linen trousers, and they're a nightmare.
The
Ironing,
creasing.
steaming shirts.
Yeah.
I will do anything to avoid ironing. It's my least favourite job. So yeah, dresses that don't require an
Dresses
iron.
that don't require an iron and can be packed away. Wool dresses, sweater dresses, that kind of thing. I
Yes.
do rather like. But 23 years at Marks and Spencer, you can take the girl out of retail, but I am interested in retail, and I do like shopping, and I still like shopping for real. I'm kind of done with online shopping, to be honest with you. I can order something if I absolutely know that the size is going to be right. But one of my favourite things to do is to trot down to Frontiers in Stafford Street. I rarely go in there without walking out with a bundle of stuff. Mm-hmm. And what I like about going there is that if I know I've got an hour to spare, I can go into the fitting room, and if I come out wearing something, they'll say, not really. I'm like, yes,
You need
results,
honesty,
you know.
do.
Yeah.
Authentic salesmen, salespeople. And I know that you've mentioned your love of the arts.
Yes.
And
yeah.
nurturing young artists is something that you're very passionate about
Yes,
as well.
absolutely. Yes, both young artists and businesswomen as well. Yes, yeah. During my time at the Fruit Market Gallery, where I was on the board for quite a number of years, and then I ended up being chair of the Fruit Market. One of the things that I learned about from their really excellent director, Fiona Bradley, is about how to spot the next great artist who's coming along. So working with living artists, also working with the legacy of artists past as well, I learned a lot about contemporary art. So I like to encourage people to go to, maybe it's the RSA summer show, or to buy a print, or to invest in art, because you're going to be supporting someone that is making a living out of this.
What do you have in your house? What do you like? What kind of, is it colour? Do you go for sketches? What do you have?
Oh, we've got a variety. I mean, my husband and I are both very, very keen art collectors, but we'll do everything from, we have 2 or 3 really treasured pieces by the Scottish artist Alison Watt. And if I'm ever requiring contemplation and to get away from, the hullabaloo, I will go to Old St Paul's Church. I don't know if you've ever been there to look at the Alison Watt altarpiece that's there. It's called Still. It's a monumental work of a piece of draped fabric, basically. And her work particularly inspires me because there is a stillness about it, but her capability, I think she's a genius, is extraordinary. So we have 2 or 3 pieces of her work. Mm-hmm. That's a place I would always go to Old St Paul's. I don't know if you know it. It's at the back of Waverley Station, cross over the road, there's a back door into Old St Paul's Church, and there's also an entrance from the Royal Mile as well. We have some pieces by Alison. We have prints that we've bought along the way from everything from local art exhibitions that we've stumbled across whilst in, Tiree or Stornoway or whatever. We have 2 or 3 pieces which were bought from the degree show at Edinburgh College of Art, Edinburgh University. There's one triptych of photographs that I particularly like, that was, which is of young swimmers, young children setting off into the swimming pool. And I particularly like that because of its colours. And what else do we have?
It's an eclectic
Prints.
mix.
A huge mix. A huge mix.
Have you been to the Five Arms in Braemar?
Not yet.
As an art lover, I think
yes.
you would absolutely adore it. I mean, you can sit and have afternoon tea underneath a Picasso.
I know.
Insane.
Yes, yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing, yeah.
Well, Manuela Worth was on our board at the Fruit Market Gallery, and I remember when they bought that hotel first, and she was saying about, what a challenge it was going to be, but how it was going to be part of the community. And I think they've achieved that, because I think there's lots of people that travel to go there, but also
But they do connect in with
they do.
It's funny, I mean, I grew up in Aberdeen, and so we went and sort of rented wee cottages in Braemar when we were kids for a wee holiday. And I remember the Fife Arms as being this place with deep fried fat sort of ingrained into these sticky tartan carpets. And the way that it is transformed is extraordinary.
It takes a bit of vision, which you obviously
has brought, a lot of vision.
Brought to the table.
Yes, definitely.
So yeah, one to add to the list, maybe.
And you said you nurture artists, but you also nurture women through their careers. So you do coaching, or do you still do coaching at all?
Yeah. I do a little bit of coaching if the phone rings and somebody asks me to help. Recently, I've had 2 or 3 people I've coached towards retirement.
Interesting.
Which is interesting, because I set my heart on retiring at a particular date in 2019, and I did that, and then I went into semi-retirement. For a lot of people who work very, very hard and have been very successful, they don't realise that they probably need a bit of a coach to help them make that transition to non-working life. And it might mean that they want to do nothing, they want to go to the golf course or whatever, that's entirely up to them. But the preparation, the psychological preparation for retirement is sometimes quite a challenge and something that they haven't probably thought about. So I do that. I'm also a mentor to women in startup businesses as well. The role I play is of being a mentor to those women. So I might only spend an hour with them. I might spend a couple of hours listening to speed pitches, when they start working through what their pitch is going to sound like, and giving them feedback. Or I might have a succession of mentoring sessions with them, maybe 4 or 5 mentoring sessions, as they start to build their business plan and then go out to market. So I really enjoy that. I learn more from those women than they learn from me. I've learned about seaweed farming, biomedical science, and I do invest. I'm an angel investor as well. I invest in women's businesses.
Can we just touch back on style?
Yes.
How would you say your style has evolved in terms of your career or just in your general life?
Yeah. Well, I suppose this is like my retail hat on again. I think your style has to evolve with the times and with your shape and with your hair colour. I mean, my hair until 2020 was dark.
You're rocking this.
Yes, Emma said that you've gone through a journey. You had to live through that journey.
Yeah.
How was that?
Well, I had always wondered what was underneath the chemicals all those years, because my mother had pure white hair and my father had pure white hair. And I must have started colouring my hair when I was about my 20s, probably. But I thought, well, this might be the opportunity. It was gradually, the colour was gradually getting lighter, and I just thought, let's go for it. And this is what was underneath. So I think that's part of my evolution, if you like, the evolution of my style, because I've had to think about what goes with white hair rather than brown hair.
Okay.
So that's been a change. And I guess what my Marks and Spencer training would tell me is that you have to think about every season as it comes along and think about what's changing. Because if you're still wearing the same stuff as you were wearing in the 1980s, or it's going to age you in some kind of way, unless you've got an absolute classic. And there are plenty. I mean, there are plenty of women I know who are wearing things that they have had for years, and they're absolutely rocking it. They're looking fantastic. But I think there's a sort of, you should always evolve your style and think about, am I with the season? I mean, I don't think about it in that respect, but I do think about what is most comfortable for me and what is the easiest thing for me to wear or to look like.
I think also, you can have older pieces, can't you? But you just add maybe a different belt, or you've got chunky jewellery or something to
you rediscover
up,
pieces, and
exactly.
That's something that I do quite a lot, uncover. There she is.
That's right.
She comes back out.
That's right. That's right. And if you put it back on and think, oh, why have I ignored this for so long? that's a good sign. If you put it back on, you go down to the kitchen and you say, I'm not quite sure about this, and the family goes, yeah.
Yeah, I did that recently. I got massive thumbs down.
Has there been that one thing through, I don't know whether it's a signature perfume, lipstick, or a piece of clothing that you reach for in that moment of, I need to pull the big girl pants on?
Yeah. Sometimes, you know, I am very, very short-sighted, and my glasses, I have 2 or 3 pairs of glasses, and I might choose a particular pair of glasses for something that's like an arty kind of event or a business event. So sometimes I do change them around. I've got a really excellent optometrist in Thistle Street, Shamim at Eyes. And my husband and I both go to her, and we have been going to her for years. She's expensive, but she knows how. It's another person where you put something on and she'll, not really. So I really value that kind of honesty. So it might be my glasses that I would,
That you would
turn to.
slide on and feel the power.
Yeah. Jewellery-wise, I'm not terribly heavy on jewellery, but I like Danish jewellery, and this would be my husband bought me this 1970s Danish ring. If I wanted to go and find something that was really exquisite as a gift for someone, or a piece for myself, or a pair of cufflinks for someone, I would go to Jeremy Snyder's antique shop in Glasgow, in Bath Street in Glasgow. I think there is no more exquisitely curated antique shop, mid-20th century. Jewellery, Danish, Scandinavian jewellery, and everything. You can buy anything from a teaspoon to a necklace. So that would be a go-to place for me to look for a gift for someone. I've got 3 goddaughters, and I love them all. They're all very different, and I like to think about whatever I'm giving them. I gave one of them a piece of Danish jewellery recently for her, I can't remember, maybe her 25th birthday.
They're lucky to have you.
Yeah.
And so are we for having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I've got so many things to go and Google and do.
Yeah.
And we're really grateful for all your amazing information. I think that St. Paul's is on the list.
Yes. Yeah, all kinds of
Glasgow's jewellery.
Glasgow's jewellery for sure, yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. It's lovely to talk to you both and have a great conversation.